This week on Quality Digest Live, we speak with Herman Reese of Two Suit America about managing risk in the quality management system.
Plus, the Ford Motor Company's customer experience movement is changing the game for car buyers. We'll find out how when we come back.
This week's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is 360 Performance Circle, your destination for today's best training tools. Streaming online now.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for June 27th, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. All right, well, the theme of this week's show is customers, a large part of the show. And to start things off, we're going to turn to our reigning queen of customer experience, Annette Franz-Glenecki, whose fun little article, 19 Signs That Customers Are Just Not That Into You, appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily.
It was a great story.
Great little story. Now, Dirk, I think you're going to agree with me that we've all had our share of painful brand name breakups over the years, right? I mean, I don't want to get too personal here, but I've certainly had some rough ones on my own. Back then, when I was just a kid, I gave my tender puppy love to Coca-Cola, only to have those years of devotion thrown back in my face over that counterfeit crap known as the New Coke.
Oh, I remember that one.
Very, very, very painful. Next was my teenage crush on Izod.
Oh, come on.
You know,
everybody had Izod t-shirts.
Those shirts were so cool until the minute that they weren't.
Yeah.
Nobody told me, though, and by the time I figured it out, it was way too late, and my senior year was doomed to the faux preppy look, and I had a dateless senior year, as it turns out.
That was a dozen of those things.
Very tragic. But as I got older, McDonald's taught me the frustration of the old, do you love me or don't you, emotional yo-yo. First they give you a McRib, then they pull it away. What is that?
What is that?
What's up with that? I don't know. But you know, that was then, and this is now. In the past, big brands controlled our relationships with them through large-scale, top-down initiatives involving advertising, pricing, merchandising, a lot of other stuff. Today, though, we customers can take some more control over our relationships with the brands, and those companies that are branded are noticing. As Glenecki points out in her article, there are several ways that we can now communicate our displeasure to the companies that that desperately want to sell us stuff. And if you happen to work for one of those companies that is a customer-facing entity and has customers like that, take note. Your relationships with your customers may not be quite as solid as you might think if you find them doing things like the following. You're not friends on social media, you know, you don't know what they're doing, they don't know what you're doing, or maybe they know and they don't care, right? If you're not connected to them, you can't really find out what they want, right? They talk and stay in contact with their exes. You should be very concerned if they're still in touch with their old providers of service. They may be having one foot out the door. They're overly critical. And that not in a constructive way. You know, they're not trying to help you get better. They're just criticizing because they're mad. They want to criticize.
They don't want you to change. They just want you to go away.
Just go away. Don't be better. Just don't be you.
Yeah, don't change for me. Just leave.
It's not you. It's me. But it's always you. And then you're not a priority. I mean, if times get tough, they're going to hit the road instead of trying to make it work, right? I mean, that's what happens when relationships don't work. Glenecki offers up 15 more of these points. And the bottom line is, if you don't want merely satisfied customers who are always looking for a bigger, better deal, if you don't want that, if you want those joyful, raving customers, partners that are going to spread the gospel about you and your company, read this and figure out what it is you can do to get a better handle on your customers. It's just like a relationship, any other relationship, right? That's the point of the story. It's a good one.
Well, I mean, and I think she makes actually kind of she's being funny with it. She's couching all of this with kind of like the little breakup things you always hear in relationships.
But it's true.
But it is true. I mean, because a customer relationship is like any other relationship, really. It's a relationship, and all the same signs are there. I mean, people are people, and when you're dealing with a customer, you're dealing with a person. And just as when somebody else is trying to get out of a personal relationship, a romantic relationship, when they're trying to get out of a customer relationship, they're basically doing the same stuff.
Thing.
Yeah.
And I was a little funny there myself, tried to be a little funny there myself with the beginning where, I had these emotional problems with these brands. But that's actually, there's some truth there too. I mean, there was, back in the day, there was this idea that you kind of had to live with it, right? I mean, sure, you had choice, but brands controlled a lot of stuff. These days, the shoe's on the other foot to a large extent. I mean, the internet's changed things. Social media's changed things where individual consumers have a pretty big voice. So again, if you're if you're in a customer-facing industry, you're serving customers who can be on social media commenting about how you're doing, make sure you understand if they're checked out of the relationship or not, because if they are, you need to take some steps and change that. So
that's right.
To look at the rest of that story and check out the rest of the stories that Dirk and I are going to be covering on today's show, as always, check out the story links right below the video player screen right down there.
That's right. Okay, well, as our upcoming guest is going to point out, in the world of quality management systems, the nature of the relationship between risk management and preventive management is often confused and misunderstood. It's often thought that simply going through the risk assessment process means that you won't need to do preventive action. And that isn't true, says Herman Reese, author of Risk Assessment and the Quality Management System, which appeared in this week's Quality Digest Daily. Herman is with us on the show today to talk a little bit about about risk and preventive action and what they mean to each other. Hi, Herman. How are you?
Hello. How are you? Glad to be here.
Oh, good. Okay, so you say in your article that risk management does not eliminate preventive action, and that, in fact, they're sequential. What do you mean by that, and can you give us an example, maybe?
Sure. Usually what happens when I'm auditing is I ask for examples of preventive action, and I get a headlights look. And I think that is because the interpretation of preventive action as being the prime element of the standard is wrong. The preventive action is a follow-up to risk assessment. You have to find out what you're trying to prevent, and then you can go ahead and see what preventive action you're going to take and then see what impact it has. But risk assessment is the input into preventive action, so it is sequential. You can't have preventive action without understanding what the risks are that you're trying to prevent.
And have you, without naming companies, obviously, can you give us an example maybe of something that you've seen, something out in the field where you do a risk assessment, you spot something, and then that leads to a type of preventive action? Is there something you might be able to share?
Well, yeah, it could be something that perhaps during obviously a follow-up to a corrective action, if something went wrong, you're basically looking at a preventive action to prevent that root cause from happening again. However, that root cause is really where the risk assessment comes in. So when you take a look at, let's say there's a product that came back from a customer, and now you want to take a look at what really happened here. The deep dive here is really the looking at caused that product to go bad, and was it people, was it documents, was it the process, was it whatever it was. And then you can actually have a defined preventive action to know exactly, yeah, that should really fix it. Now, if something never happened in the first place, such as a preventive action by itself, then you take a look at the risk, but you don't know if what you're going to do is going to fix it because it didn't happen in the first place. So the risk, the definition of the risk itself becomes extremely important because you need to know exactly what you're trying to fix, and that gives you the exact steps on how to approach that.
Okay, you said something there that kind of caught my ear. You mentioned you mentioned documentation. The problem might be in documentation. In your article, you say that I believe you say that all of the elements described in an ISO 9001 compliant QMS can benefit from risk assessment, and you mentioned documentation, management review, training, and so forth. But one that actually kind of seemed a little unexpected for me was a risk analysis of your documentation, and you just mentioned that. What do you mean by that? I mean, what kind of risks might your documentation pose?
Well, the documentation these days is no longer the paper document that we're really talking about. I would say 85–90% of documentation is online. So when a company has a global operation, then very often the documentation is dependent on a localization for various parts of the world, wherever it is being used. And so the documentation itself needs to be extremely specific as to what it is trying to do. What is the expected result of this documentation? What do we want to see in the use of this document? And that is really the risk assessment. Can this be misinterpreted? Is the documentation really exact enough to give the desired result? And if it is not, then that is the risk that needs to be examined. What is the wording? What is the follow-through? What is the expected result when we use this documentation?
So what you're saying is that if the documentation itself isn't precise enough, or maybe even has a mistake, it can cause the documentation itself can lead to negative consequences.
That is exactly it. And I think that is something that has to be done by trial and error before it gets put into actual practice. So you do have a new document that is being revised, or you have something that you're posting on the web, then you have to take a look. Can we try this out? Can we check this out? And not just post it because it was somebody's great idea. I mean, that's the risk, is that it's some local idea that may be very good for that particular site, but it doesn't apply to other sites. And so the implementation could lead to larger problems. So the risk assessment is really in the completion of the documentation. Is it really comprehensive enough for everyone to understand with the details that people need?
Herman, one problem that you point out with risk analysis of a quality management system is that when preventive actions are based on possible but not proven risks are implemented. So the results are often difficult to verify. Maybe you can explain that. It's a little bit of an interesting way to look at it. So maybe you can explain that a little bit more, what you're talking about there.
Sure. When you take a look at a preventive action that is the result of a risk analysis, right now, I mean, when we take a look at what the standard says right now, I don't know what the new standard comes out, but right now, when we're taking a look at that, we're still looking at the effectiveness of what we've done, the effectiveness of the preventive action. And that, I think, is what I mentioned earlier, is that when nothing's happened in the first place, how can you say that this preventive action actually did the trick and actually prevented that risk from happening? So a lot of times the preventive action that is stated in result of a risk analysis is kind of vague because we don't really know what we're going to be looking for. I think it is extremely important that the preventive action be clear enough and have precise steps what we want to do, because we need to see what was the impact of what we did. You can't look at the effectiveness of something that happened when you implement it, but when you take a look at what's the possible impact, that is the risk analysis that needs to be done. What could possibly be happening to all the processes? All the processes related, and they have inputs and outputs. So the preventive action as a result of a risk analysis is a process, and it can have an impact on other areas, and that is the impact that needs to be studied.
How important is it, or is it even possible, just kind of keeping in the same vein here, is really being able to understand whether your preventive action is actually even going to work? I mean, is that just one of those things where you correct it on the fly? You do your risk analysis, you come up with a preventive action. Unfortunately, that thing happens, and you put your preventive action in place, and maybe it didn't work. Is there even a way to test for that?
Well, no, there isn't, and that's exactly the point that I'm saying. The quality of the up front, that of course determines what your preventive action is going to be. If you know what the expected impact would be, or what could be an impact of the preventive action, then you can already take a look at was it really working or not, or did it create a bigger problem than what we had in the first place? So the risk analysis really is, unless you have the right amount of detail of input from everybody concerned, it can be kind of vague, and therefore the preventive action is stated in the same vagueness, and therefore doesn't lead to, let's say, concrete actions that could actually say, well, we've covered everything that we can think of, and if we do this, the impact is going to be not going to happen, and it's not affecting anything else. So the quality of the risk assessment is the all-important thing, and more people you have involved in that, with all the related processes that might be affected, the better are. The preventive action is only something you're actually going to do and try out and see if it works, but you can't really tell unless you have a desired result.
Well, Herman, we're going to leave it there, but everyone out there who's interested in this topic, and there are many of us who are, can tune in, because we're going to have a webinar, Dirk, that you and Herman are going to be presenting together on July 8th. And you can see it right there, July 8th, Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Herman, in your article is a link out to the registration page. All of you out there can follow your email. We'll be having more information about how you can register for that webinar and take a deeper dive on this topic with Dirk and with Herman on July 8th. So, Herman, we'll see you then. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll check in with you again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. We'll see you then.
See you then. Thanks, Herman. Bye. Good stuff. Well, risk. Hey, we talk about risk a lot, and risk and the QMS. A lot of you out there are obviously working in quality management systems and need to understand that. And if you want to understand more, Herman's got a lot to say about
That's
it.
right.
So make sure
Sign
you
up for that webinar.
Tune in for that webinar on July 8th. Okay. Well, we had a good story from Ryan Day, our own Ryan Day this week, and Ryan's been following Ford Motor Company very closely, as many of you know out
Imagine
there.
that.
Imagine that. And we had a story that ran from Ryan yesterday in Thursday's issue of Quality Digest Daily called "Corporate Leaders Bet on Consumer Experience in 2014 and Beyond." And again, that ran in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And as I say, Ryan's been closely following the story with Ford and the reinvention of the Ford Motor Company for the past several years. And he's looked at it from the perspective of technology, innovation, sustainability, and a lot of other stuff, all of which Ford is combining to really be the car, and not really even the car manufacturer, but kind of the personal mobility device manufacturer of the future. They're looking at it from a very holistic, almost gestalt perspective, if you will, about what cars really mean to people. And it's interesting the way they're handling this, because it really affects customers as well, and that's really the topic of this latest article, because it's looking at an internal Ford concept that's become known as the customer experience movement, and very carefully worded, Dirk, customer experience movement. We'll come back to why they exactly chose those words here in a moment. What's interesting about the CEM, again, the customer experience movement, is that it embodies Ford's dedication to partnership. And partnership means not only working with their suppliers and their dealers, which is a big part of this, but their customers too. They're all stitched together into a chain of support, and they're all really involved as a partnership in terms of delivering automobiles and mobility experiences that the consumers need. The story talks, and Ryan talks about how Alan Mulally, the CEO, the former CEO of Ford, had this idea for the CEM through visiting an Apple store, benchmarking. We always talk about benchmarking and the importance of benchmarking. Well, Alan Mulally benchmarked against an Apple store to see how they did it and to really understand what they did when they had the customer in their space, and how they engaged and nurtured that customer and made that customer into an Apple customer, a long-term Apple customer in many cases. So Alan Mulally thought about this and said, well, gosh, our touch point many times is the dealership, and we're maybe not doing a good enough job with taking what Apple's doing, benchmarking against that, and bringing it into the dealers. So he brought this thing forward, and he began talking to dealers and Ford executives to develop this customer experience movement, and truly is a movement. And really, they understood that it was a lot of things involved with this. It wasn't just selling a car at the lowest price. It was a lot of things that went into that experience for the customer. And one thing they did, which was really interesting and different, was instead of just sitting down with their dealers and kind of shooting the bull a little bit about what they wanted, what they needed, they brought in a third party. They brought in third-party coaches to be a buffer between Ford management and the dealers. So it wasn't just management dealing with dealers and saying, do this, and dealers saying, we can't do that. They brought in coaches, and coaches that would enable the dealers to understand why they were doing this and act as buffers and lightning rods and feedback loops for those dealers and for management as well. And what that did is it really engaged everybody in the process. It created a feedback loop. It gave everybody a voice in the process to ultimately understand how best to serve their customers. Now, Ryan was down and actually visited a dealer to talk about this program in the last couple of weeks. And I want to show you a clip right now. This is from Justin Hansel. And Justin is the general manager of Hansel Ford dealership in Santa Rosa, California, not too far from where we are right now. And Justin Hansel is going to explain to you here in this clip exactly how the CEM program came together and what it means for their dealership. So let's roll that right now.
It's probably our 5th year in the movement, and I'm all in. I don't see us ever not being in the movement. That's a great thing. That's why it's a movement. No, you can't call it a program. A program has a start date and an end date, whereas our movement there's no end. It's ongoing. Undoubtedly, it's had a very positive impact on our financial results, our customer service scores, more importantly than the scores themselves, retention, loyalty. Certainly, we wouldn't be where we are today in this market if it weren't for the consumer experience movement.
So there it is, the CEM, the consumer experience movement, and again, he defines it as a movement. It's kind of analogous in many ways to continuous improvement versus continual improvement, where you want to continuously improve, you don't want to continually improve. And a movement indicates that you're going to continuously do something as opposed to a program which is going to stop and start, maybe, as time goes along. Really interesting stuff here, and I think you really need to read the article because there's a lot here. There's also some quotes from from Elena Ford, who's the great-great-granddaughter of Henry Ford, great-great-great-granddaughter, I think. She talks about this program as well, and it's really good clips, more clips with Justin Hansel as well. So check that out.
It's a good story.
Really good story, and interesting. Like I said, there's a lot here. I don't really have the bandwidth here to get all that deep into it, but really the idea is here, management working with these coaches to interact with the dealers, to figure out what the metrics need to be to improve them and to improve the organization and improve customer experience. That's really what it all comes down to. So
good stuff.
Really good stuff there from Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ford, for a great story. Okay. Well, we're going to move on quickly to a really great Tech Corner, too, because we have Rob Bellinger, who's a guest and comes down and does Tech Corners with us on occasion. Rob is here today with Dirk and going to be looking at the Olympus Stream again. So Rob and Dirk, guys, take it away.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Once again, Rob, thanks for joining us in the studio here. And what kind of software are we looking at today?
Well, again, we're going to dive into the Olympus Stream analytical software package. This is one specific solution that we're going to look at called Count and Measure. So Count and Measure is a solution within the Olympus Stream software that allows customers to size and classify maybe particles or voids or different, particles that are colored compared to other backgrounds, so they can get percentages of them total, counts total, sizing, shapes, any kind of measurement value.
And this is on a 2D image capture, or directly on a microscope that's live?
Well, it could be that. It could be on a direct microscope, so these could be hooked to stereo or compound microscopes, inverted scopes, or it could be like an engineering station where they bring the images back and they run it through our software.
Okay, which is kind of how we're doing it today.
That's how we're doing it today, yeah. So to begin with, we have a sample up here. This is a demonstration cross-section of a material sample, like metal. And a customer might want to look at the void spots and size these inside this metal. Maybe
these black areas.
Yeah, the black areas. So these might be some weak areas in the metal. So first, the software has the ability to identify and outline a region of interest around this U-shaped metal piece. It allows us, through this Count and Measure tool window here, to quickly do automatic thresholding. Now what thresholding does is it looks at the intensity of a background to an intensity of whatever you're interested in. Could be by color, could be by grayscale, could be by their shape factors even.
Okay.
And different things like that.
This is automatic, or the threshold is adjustable?
This is I'm showing the automatic right here, how the software determined based upon the histogram. It automatically set the levels for us. Later on I'll show a live one as well. So really, with automatic, you select it and hit Count and Measure on a region of interest, and the software does the rest. It's going to identify, size, and classify all the particles or voids in this sample here.
I see three different colors on here.
Three different colors are determined by the class. We separate those classes by their area. So this is a large, medium, and small size class. So we have our large particles, our medium, and our small particles.
So the red ones are the small, obviously, and the green is medium, yellow is
would be our larger.
Okay.
So if we look down here, we can have our three classes sorted, and this gives us our total area in micrometers squared per class of all the particles grouped together, or voids in this case. This also gives us the area, the fraction, kind of like a phase percentage of the total particles in those classes, compared to the region of interest that we selected around this metal piece.
So you mean for any particular particle class or size, it gives you the percentage of the total
area they take up inside the region of interest, correct. And it'll even give you the relative object count within each class. We can go a little further than that. We can look at the individual particles themselves. So if we actually click on a particle, it'll highlight it in the list of the particle list, or voids as these are, and it'll give you individual information on each one, to area of that single particle or void, the ferrite measurement, which is the widest max distance inside the particle at any given point, perimeters. You can even get things like shape factor, how circular this particle is. There's many, many more measurement values that we can sort by, but wanted to show another quick feature. If you look at this one, this is really two particles that are kind of adjoined.
Oh, kind of joined together. Okay.
Yeah, so within our software we could select all the ones that we feel are adjoined and hit an auto split feature, and that will separate those out for us.
So it determines what how much overlap there is and decides whether to split those
exactly
apart.
how much that they're touching together,
Okay.
and if it's if there's a shape coming into each other and there's too much touching, then it's considered to be all together as one whole. If there's a slight amount of touching, it can actually separate that with this
And then
feature.
obviously it classifies them at the same time. Okay.
So then you can click on each one separately, and it's updated our class. So now it's not the yellow class anymore; it's a green and a red class. So that built in makes it quick results. You can edit your results very fast by splitting, by manually splitting them if you had to. But then all these results are shown in the list. These all go out to our report format in the final output. Another thing that customers sometimes look for beyond just counting and sizing the individual particles themselves is they might want to know a phase percentage. Maybe not even particles. It might be just like a background layer compared to another layer. They want to know the percentage of one compared to each other. So in that case, we could look at a sample like this where you have a carbon fiber sample. This has carbons and then the background media that holds it all together. They want to get a percentage typically of the one media compared to another.
The percentage, let's say rosin to carbon fiber.
Rosin to fiber.
Too much or too little, neither one is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right.
So on a sample like this, it might do twofolds. They might want to count the voids, but then they'll probably also want to get the phase. So what we can do in the software is quickly switch to phase instead of counting classes. And with this one, we can set up 3 separate thresholds. So if I do this, you can see that we've set up one threshold for the dark backgrounds, another threshold for the lighter fiber material, and then a bright threshold for the cross-section fibers that are a little bit brighter. Just by hitting count measure on this, we'll get our results as well down here in the 3 classes that we separated. So you can get total region of interest, the percentage within this field of view of how much those 3 different classes take up. And you can see that even in a class histogram here. I'll expand this real quick. The class histogram breaks it down so you can see the percentage of those 3 compared to the entire field of view of the image.
And typically for this software, what markets are typically using this?
So this will have a broad range. It's going to be a lot of materials though, like fibers and metals, but it could be into manufacturing of like medical devices for knowing their cleanliness.
Sure. Particle count.
Particle count and stuff like that. Also semiconductor. They might be interested in particle count or maybe even like a void area of their devices that they're manufacturing. So it has a lot of placements, even down to just powders. You know, customers are making filters. Will sometimes filter through colored beads, and they'll want to size and classify the red colored beads from the green ones because they're different sizes, and how many of those pass through the filters that they're manufacturing. Could be air filters, water filters. There's a broad range, and that's why the material science, the material solution modules here kind of cover that broad range. Another thing to point out in the Stream software, the count and measure solution kind of covers everything: phase, particle sizing, a group of everything. But if a customer is doing one specific type of thing, we do have those broke down into individual solution modules, like porosity, phase analysis, like what we did here, or particle distribution. These solution modules being focused make it a little bit easier for a user interface, and it's only going to come out with one result, the results they're looking for that are focused. And it's a much more simple user interface, large button interface. I've shown these in the past.
Yeah, exactly. The user interface is always really good,
And at the end, it gets the data focused out to what they want. It can batch process large amounts of images as well through databasing or file formats. So.
Okay. And what was the software called again?
This is the Olympus Stream software.
Okay.
And the solution module, we have count and measure, and then the other solution modules here, porosity, phase analysis, or particle distribution.
Okay.
They all do similar functions.
Rob, thanks for coming by once again and showing us Olympus software, Olympic Stream, right?
Olympus Stream software.
Olympus Stream. All right. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Back to you, Mike.
There you go. Yes, the Olympus Stream from Rob Bellinger and Olympus. Another great tech corner there from Rob. Thank you for coming down. Rob's not too far from us, so every once in a while he comes down the road, comes down I-5, I-99 actually, and joins us here in Chico to do a tech corner. So that's a great one. Thank you, Rob, for doing that, and thank you, Olympus, for providing it. Well, that's our show for this week, but before we go, one more thank you to today's sponsor, 360 Performance Circle, a new kind of training company. With handsomely produced streaming video content, covering lean, quality, and best practices within test and measurement, 360 Performance Circle is your destination point for the best training on the web. For more information, check out the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining this week. Thanks to Herman Reese from Two Suit for joining us via Skype.
And don't forget about the webinar, that's right.
Yes, and the webinar. Why don't we throw that slide up there again?
That's right,
webinar. Risk Assessment and Quality Management System, July 8th. If you want to know all about risk and preventive action and how that ties into your quality management system, you'll want to go to that webinar. Also, thanks again to Rob Bellinger from Olympus for joining us out here with another great product, software from Olympus. And well, I guess that's the end of our day.
That's it. Yeah, next week, no Quality Digest Live. We're all set
July
about
4th.
That. July 4th, we'll be barbecuing. Dirk will be having a beer quickly. One fast beer. Gone in 60 seconds over here.
Fin de monde.
That's
that's what I had last week.
That's right. That was good.
Great.
That's right. So July 4th, no QDL next week. We will have Quality Digest Daily Monday through Thursday, so look out for that. And we'll join you back here for another Quality Digest Live on July 11th. So mark your calendar. And of course, don't forget about the webinar on July 8th.
That's right.
All right, that's our show. So have a great weekend, everybody.
So long.
See ya. Bye.
Thank you.